Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today from Sophion, where we'd like to let you in on some of the new features that we have just developed for our QPatch. I can see we have something like 17 people on, and we are expecting more. So we will leave a little more time for those to get on stage. Meanwhile, I can tell you that if you look at the right-hand side of your screen, you should have a chat box where you're more than welcome to write any questions that arise through this webinar, and we will then answer your questions afterwards. There's also a polls tab that you are more than welcome to click on and answer those small questions we have raised. We're very interested in knowing your use of current clamp and whether you have experience with automated patch clamp, etc. And we also have some handouts in the handouts section for you, paper, some application reports, and also some brochures. But while we wait for the rest to join, I think I'll just put on a small video so you can see a virtual representation of our lab. A lab that you're more than welcome to visit anytime you like. Well, welcome back. I think I will carry on with the welcome presentation, and I will share you this one. And start by telling you that you might not know Sophion as a company, but we have been devoted to making a patch clamp as easy as possible and as precise as possible, preserving the virtues of manual patch clamping ever since year 2000 when we started. And we have some products out there, but most interestingly, we have a lot of feedback from our users that we try to adapt to the best of our ability. One such thing is that when you have automated patch clamp instrumentation, you are running all your experiments, you could say, very unbiased. You don't pick the cell based on their looks or size or shape, but you also will then have to live with the normal biological spread in behavior or variation in biophysical properties, you could say. So back in 2019, we came out with the first adaptive protocol, which was to adapt to the voltage-gated recordings of ion channels. And if you look at the left-hand panel, you can see an example of a recording where you have a fixed protocol, hence allowing the normal biological spread of, in this case, voltage-gated sodium channels and their, you could say, position of Boltzmann fit to their steady state inactivation. And you can see that if you look at, for instance, the red dots and look for what would the potential come out as if you ask for 20% inactivation. Then with the advent of adaptive protocols, you can now ask the instrument to make a online assessment of each individual cell and interrogate the cell at its own biophysical properties, so to speak. So when you then turn it around and say, now I want a cell to be specifically inactivated 20%, or the channels of the cell being inactivated 20%, you can see in the right-hand panel how much tighter the data population becomes, whether it's 20, 40, 60, or 80% inactivation you are asking for. We call that VXX because you set the fraction of inactivation you want to, and then the instrument does the rest for you. But it's of course not only voltage clamp that is of interest out there. Actually, you could claim that nature is current clamped. Often we only look at voltage clamping in the laboratory because it's, you could say, more easy to make quantitative measures of, making IC50 values of various compounds. But current clamp is of course very, very important also, and that is possible to do also on automated patch clamp instruments. And here I show you a paper by Guowan Lu that came out a few months ago, showing some very interesting data on GRG derived from mice, and using, among other techniques, current clamp. And bringing those two together, you could say, this adaptiveness and the current clamp, we're now taking the next step in that on that avenue. So with QPatch, so far only QPatch, but the two other platforms we have will also get it in the near future. We can now provide you with adaptive current clamp. So in other words, tightening up data from a current clamp perspective. And my colleague, Dr. Kim Bodum, is ready in a few seconds to give you a much more in-depth insight into what this can be used for. But just before I hand over to Kim, I will just give you an idea of why we are also contributing with this step, this development step, because we want to take part in a bigger range of drug discovery, among other things. But here on this slide, you can see how we have always been active on the voltage clamp on cell lines, but now we also claim to play a bigger role in, for instance, current clamp on DRG cells or other neuronal, or for that matter, cardiac type of cells, and hence making a smaller step when you move from voltage clamp to, say, slice preparation or animal testing, and then eventually going into man for drug discovery. Of course, I am aware not everything is about drug discovery. It can also be basic research, and there we also like to play a role for sure. So with that, I will leave the stage and welcome Kim, who will tell you much more about what adaptive current clamp is and how it's used, and how also the analysis can be used. So Kim, please.
Thank you, Mads. I will share my screen. So, I have a presentation I want to show you. Yeah, so we're talking about the new current clamp features. There have been the development not only in adaptive current clamp, which I'll be talking about, but also the analysis around action potentials has been expanded and trimmed in the newest version of our software. And this is driven by the action potential, the need to record action potential. It's getting more and more popular to record from primary cells, from iPSC-derived cells. It can be neuronal cells. So here you see an action potential from, so a textbook example of an action potential, a neuronal action potential. And here's a cardiac action potential. And adaptive current clamp has been another step in development to get better current clamp recordings, action potential recordings. So as I said, this is the textbook example, the action potential, cardiac action potential. And this is a action potential recorded on a QPatch. So, and in some cases, we see that the resting membrane potential, so actually before the action potential, that is depolarized, as you see in this cell here. So instead of being in a physiological range, so around -90 or around, then it depolarized or at 0. And why this depolarized resting potential? It can be when you look at iPSC-derived cells. Then if the cells are immature, not expressing this sufficient amount of ion channels, then it cannot maintain this action potential, resting potential. But the ion channels can also be compromised if you have primary cells and the enzymatic degradation of the ion channels are reducing the current. It can also be the cell health or poor seal giving this depolarized potential. And you see, not only is that changed, but the morphology of the action potential changed therewith. And why that? So the action potential is here, the cardiac is driven by a sodium channel, NAV 1.5. And if you have a depolarized resting state, then you see the biophysical properties of NAV 1.5, and especially the inactivation curve. And then at minus 40, which is around here, then most of the ion channels, the sodium channels, will actually be inactivated and not able to elect the action potential. In this case, around minus 40, there are still some calcium channels. And so this is probably calcium-driven action potential, but it is far from being physiological relevance. So therefore, adaptive current clamp is developed to assist the cells to maintain a more physiological relevant resting potential. And here are some examples recorded on a QPatch. You see with standard current clamp, you see these this different morphology. There's one cell that was able to fire an action potential with a relevant morphology, but the two other ones here, they look strange. But by pulling down the resting potential of these three cells, then you get a more relevant morphology. And what is also important to see here is that the cell that actually could fire an action potential, there the action potential is not affected by the adaptiveness. And as Mads also talked about before, then not only are you getting more action potential, so a higher success rate across an experiment, where you might be patching 48 cells, you get a larger fraction of the cells with good action potentials. But also when you look at the action potentials and the data derived from there, here you see a action potential recorded in a iPSC-derived cardiomyocytes. We looked at the peak potential, the hyperbolized potential, and also the duration of the action potential. So the APD 50 and the APD 90. And this is from the same cell recorded with and without, and then with adaptive current clamp feature. And you see how the spreads is minimized, so you get more tight data. So you get more action potential and tighter data using the feature. And to go a little bit behind the scenes, so what is happening? It is happening online, so you can record in one liquid period. You can record the current that is needed to clamp the cell at minus 90, for example. This you set yourself, and then that value will be stored in the database. Then there will be a range check. You can say this is a quality filter to see if this value is relevant, and you decide what are the ranges. And if it falls out, there will be a fallback value that it will be clamped to. And if not, then the adaptive value will be applied. And you see this is the first liquid period, and then here period x plus 1, then you then apply this value, and that can be 84 different value across the plate. So this is the adaptiveness, is that each cell is getting the treatment that it needs, and not a common value for the entire plate. So for those of you who thinks, yay, we need to do that straight away, I'll show you how it's done. So it's not just this schematic representation, but I actually have the analyzer open here. And to show you that it's a fairly simple feature to set up, you just make a new voltage protocol. You add a voltage segment. Now we are in voltage clamp. and you say that you, for example, in 1 second, you will measure the cell clamped at -90. This is commonly used. And then we use the online cursor, the green here. So we need to move that, and that is done in the online cursor tab. And then adaptive current clamp lives here next to VHAF, as Mads also talked about. Then you can activate adaptive measurements here. You move the cursor. And then you will measure the current running in this interval. So this will be one liquid period, and then you will make a new voltage protocol in the second liquid period, and here you can then apply the value that is recorded, and this value will then be different between the cells. So therefore you will you'll go to current clamp in this current clamp, and now this adaptive current clamp is available. And then this is the quality filters that I briefly talked about before. So you can say, I want to apply this adaptive value, but if it is below, for example, -100 picoamps, I don't think it's relevant. Or if it's above 0, I don't think it's relevant. So therefore that should be my limits. And if it falls out of that, then there is a fallback value that could be -5 picoamps, for example. So the cells will either get the adaptive value, but if it falls out of this spectrum, then it will get this fallback value. And of course, also need to give it a duration. There we go. And then you see this purple interval here is the adaptiveness, and the dotted line indicates that there is a fallback value, but the actual value is not known until after the experiment. But it's within this range. You can, in the same voltage protocol, also do regular current clamp. So you don't have to do everything adaptive. You can go in and out of the adaptive feature. And you can also, if you find that interesting, you can also do current clamp in the same voltage protocol. So here is a protocol where we do adaptive current clamp, classic current clamp, and also voltage clamp. This is really helpful when you do assay development. And then you will set up your assay as you're used to. And then I cannot stop myself showing you some data as well. And I don't want to save this, because now you can record action potential. And here I will talk a little bit more about the new analysis that are available, because we would like to get more advanced here. So again, some action potentials, they are paced. They are recorded in iPSC-derived cardiomyocytes, and here you see a baseline. So this is in saline, and then a compound is being added. This is nifedipine, so a calcium blocker, and then you see how the action potential is shortened. And this is quite obvious, but you would also like some data on that. So pulling a cursor interval across, as you would do with any other data, then you get all these features available. For example, interpeak interval, action potential duration, and so on. I'll get back to the features. But just to let you know that then this data here will be available, and you can either analyze it in our software, or you can export it and then analyze it in a third-party software if that's what you prefer. But to make it a little bit easier to look at, I will jump back to my presentation. And here you can see again an action potential from an iPSC-derived cardiomyocyte. There is the saline. You don't see my pointer, sorry. So the green action potential is a baseline recording, And then with the compound nifedipine, you see a shortening of the action potential. And the features that you can then, the data that you can get out of it is the threshold. So at what value does the action potential fire? What is the peak value? And also the action potential amplitude is then the difference between the two. You have here APD 30, 50, 90. There's also more to choose from. But here, these values are good to show that it's actually a shortening of the action potential. You can find the hyperpotential value, but also the rate, so the depolarization rate, the repolarization rate, and also now here's the flat line. But if you have a diastolic depolarization, you can also retrieve the rate of the depolarization. And with these data, now I'd like to show what we can get out of that. So here's an application where you see again iPSC-derived cardiomyocytes. From the experiments, we got a success rate where we could record action potential in around 50% of the patch cells. And you can see there is a difference in morphology between the recorded cells. And here we focused on the APD 90. And with that value, we could see an effect of different compounds. The first one here, BK, is a calcium channel opener. So you elongate the action potential. There is here nifedipine, where you see a shortening of the action potential, and then a hERG blocker in the end, where you also see a clear effect on the action potential. And not only was it possible to see drug effect, but we could now actually do dose response experiments. So have different concentrations. You see here BK in increasing concentrations. I can see how they increasingly elongate the action potential. The first dose response curve is for this experiment here, the cell you see here, but we could actually do it across several cells and get a group IC50 value based on the action potential. And again, we were able to make dose response experiments on nifedipine, seeing the shortening of the action potential. You see here again the results from this cell, and then for the group we can get an IC50 value based on the action potentials. Yeah, with these data, I will also leave the stage, and then I think Jane, you will take care of questions.
Hello, I think that there are a few questions from Andres. Andres asked, Kim, cool APs, how is the variability between individual APs? I mean, how stable is it? Andres asks.
Ooh, that's a really good question. That is really depending on the cells. I think that's the main cause of variation, because we see some, what can you say, the source of the cells also really important. So we see when we work together with some people, there's a larger variation, and some people are getting really consistent action potentials. They look alike. They're not always the same, and you never get 100% success rate from all the cells, but it's really depending on the material. Did that answer your question? Okay,
maybe
but at least we can see.
Kim, maybe you can also add, or would it be fair to say that this variability is also one of the reasons why adaptiveness is a good feature, because to be fair, the instrument doesn't know which cell it picks, but as long as it can adapt to whatever it gets on to the patch clamp, then you get a better recording.
That is true, and as I said in the beginning, with iPSC-derived neurons and iPSC-derived cardiomyocytes, then even batch-to-batch variations between the maturity, is it ventricular, is it atrial cardiomyocytes, that varies from batch to batch. And with this feature, we can at least assist the resting potential and thereby get a more a better possibility to reproduce our results. And when you work with primary cells, then it's a harsh procedure to harvest cells from an animal. So you will see some cells that are more damaged than others, and again, this feature can help them maintain their resting potential.
I can see Ludmila has a question, but before that, I will just follow up with the next question from Andreas. He asked, maybe I missed it, but adaptive current clamp does not have an effect on APD90, right? That's one for you, Kim.
Yeah. That's a good question. No, but it does, of course, because when you get a more stable recording, then you also get a less spread. So in that way, it's affecting APD90. You see there's less spread in the data and more stable recordings. So in that way, you see a difference. But of course, it shouldn't affect the APD90 by changing it completely. So, but more stable data, less spread.
All right, thank you. So Ludmila asks, hi, is the adaptive current clamp feature available on the QPatch Compact? Not as of today, but it will become available in the near future. What is that? I'm product management. I cannot promise too much, but I dare say within this year. And for sure, don't hesitate to get a compact, because as everything else, we can update you retrospectively because of the software nature of these features. And to add to that, it's also becoming available at some point on Cube. Then we have a question from Mark. Very nice to see this old school technique being rolled out to modern APC platforms. Thank you, Mark. Just to be clear, on Cube and non-mass software-driven QPatch, the current clamp was not injecting a holding current, brackets, but could inject current pulses to trigger APs, question mark, i.e. like C = 0 on the old Heka amp front panel, question mark. I hand that over to you, Kim.
Thank you very much. So let's call it classic current clamp. You can eject a current if you want to. You can pace action potential by injecting a current. But when working with manual patch clamp, then you can adjust the current you want to inject according to the cell you're recording. But here everything is done automatic and also in parallel. So you have 48 cells in parallel. So getting the value that each cell needs is the adaptive feature here, so that the system online itself can figure out what is needed to assist this resting potential, and then that is adjusted across the plate.
Right. Mark continues with a question. Can a protocol be created to determine threshold as a delta from the adaptive holding current? Did you get that question?
Yeah, I did. Not online today, I can say. Without promising too much, but yeah, you'll probably see that in the future.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So we do a lot of work on the.
Oh, sorry. A colleague coming in here, VP of R&D, Thomas.
Yeah.
You can answer that. Help us write it, and I'll read it. Or is it too long to be written? Damien supports with a drum roll.
Yeah, we do exciting things in the lab without revealing too much.
it will be available in the future. So he's just repeating you, Kim. So that's good that we are all aligned.
That's kind of cool. I was invited on stage. The not so cool thing is I'm sitting here in a meeting outfit. But yes, Kim said it already. So it was a very good question, Mark. It is something we have been asked to develop, and it will be available in the future, and it will be available in the very near future as well. And as previously mentioned, this adaptiveness is something that is being developed both for QPatch and Cube. So where you will see it first, you will find out soon. But it is something that have been asked for, and something that will be available.
Thank you, Thomas.
Sorry for my.
Despite your outfit.
Just happy that you cannot smell me.
Any more questions? Please come forward, or you can always write us either directly if you know some of us by email or at info@sophion.com, obviously. And we also still have the polls with some questions some of you have been so kind to answer. And it appears that quite a few of you are actually doing current climb recordings in your daily scientific life. So that's great to hear. Yeah, as we are showing on the screen now, we have some great events coming up. In May, we have the Ion Channel Modulation Symposium in Japan, and then in June 21st, 22nd, we have also the ICMS in the United Kingdom. Please go and check out our website for more details and signing up for these events if you're interested. There's a question written here from Mark to Thomas. Mark wonders if he will be allowed to attend the UK ICMS. I think we will take that in another forum. Any more question? Oh, Jane insists there may be a special connection there. So, but if we don't have any more direct questions, I think I will, on behalf of my colleagues, Kim, Jane, and Sophion, say thank you for your attendance and welcome you back anytime in the future. As I said, either visit our website, write us, or look out for the next webinar to come. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.